Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Tien, and it's a delight to welcome you today to Emma Explores with Emma Cox. Each each month, Emma joins us to share special stories from within her family tree and then little tips on how she got there. So, with that, I'm going to back out and welcome Emma Cox. Go ahead, please, Emma.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Give me one moment. And here we go. So today we're going to be talking about publishing. So I'm going to be referring to one of my ancestors. His name was Edward William Cox, and some of his things about his publishing business and his successors and other people within the wider family, because this is an area where there are quite a few people in my family who are involved in publishing. So that's publishing of things like books, magazines, newspapers, articles, that sort of thing, quite relevant to what we're doing today on Substack. For anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Emma Cox, family historian and genealogist based in the UK, and I do all sorts of things to do with family history and genealogy, as it says on the screen there. Also have my podcast, Journeys into Genealogy, and interview people, and there's over 120 episodes on there now. So today, this topic is going to cover writing, publishing, inheritance, patterns and trends within the family tree. So we're starting with Edward William Cox. Now, he was born in 1809 and he died in 1879. And this is a picture of him. He was an entrepreneur, and this is from the Illustrated London News. Hang on, come on. And a brief background to him. He was born in Taunton, down in Somerset in the West Country. And he started off, he wasn't always a publisher. He was trained as a solicitor, and he published magazines and newspapers across England. So there were some he did in Somerset. He moved to London, started or took over some in London. So he worked across the UK. He is my 3 times great-grandfather. His first one was a newspaper called the Somerset County Gazette, and he published that in 3 towns called Taunton, Bridgewater and Wells in Somerset, and that was launched at the end of December in 1836. And it was a 3.5 pence 4-page broadsheet. And the quote is, "It was established by public subscription of the nobility, gentry, and inhabitants of Somerset to supply its commerce and agriculture with a general medium for communication and advertisements." And advertisements were very important because they were how the revenue was brought in. So in a lot of cases, the whole front page of some magazines and newspapers was advertisements. 180 years later, it is still published, although he sold it, or one of his descendants sold it in the early 20th century. So it's just celebrated its 180th anniversary. And he went on from that start to set up something called the Law Times, which he was a solicitor. He practiced in London, and he found that there was a need for news to be shared within the legal community. So that could be who was working where, the type of cases they were working on, all sorts of different things. So that was set up in 1843. And these are the sort of things that they actually talked about. So this is just before saying that they're launching it. So the Law Times, new subscribers can begin with the new year. It's a journal of practical law and the organ of the profession. It contains the most early and complete reports of all the courts, comments and intelligence on every branch of the law, and the advertisements of the profession and of estates, etc., for sale. Price 1 shilling. And the Law Times office was at 29 Essex Street in the Strand. And it also mentions another one called The Critic, which actually is another one of his. So this actually celebrated its centenary, so 100 years in 1943, and I found a little newspaper extract of this. And basically, it contains forwards by the Lord Chancellor and the Lord Chief Justice and lots of influential legal people saying, congratulations, you've done a very good job to actually last for 100 years. And the Law Times itself led to several other newspapers and magazines. There was one called The Magistrate, or the County Courts Chronicle, which came out monthly. And this is the header for that one. So you can see it was 1 shilling and 6 pence. And if you had a stamped one, so it was sent to you, it was 1 shilling and an extra penny there. by the editor of and contributors to the Lord Times. So this actually started off as a column within the Lord Times newspaper, and it transitioned to being its own separate publication. Another one that it led to was called The Critic, and this started as a book review section of the Lord Times. And then again, that went on to its own separate magazine journal. And then that gave rise to something called the Clerical Journal. So he was an entrepreneur. He set up lots of different things, or he took something and he adapted it. He made it successful. He was very, very good at what he did. And this is a little testimonial or a little present that people made for him. So this was testimonial to Mr. Cox, editor of the Lord Times in 1859. So sorry about the layout of this. This is actually all around the picture, but to make it fit on the screen, I had to sort of cut it up slightly. So it says, we have the honour of presenting a piece of plate in acknowledgement of his valuable services to the profession, and we have the pleasure of engraving it. The large silver centrepiece consisting of a richly chased vase standing on a square plinth with 4 panels for the inscription and armorial bearings. Don't know quite how big it was, but I'm assuming it was probably maybe a foot high, maybe 2 feet high, so it was quite large. And this artistic piece of metalwork was designed and manufactured by Mr. Metcalfe Hopgood of Bishopsgate Street. Now, Edward William Cox also went on to publish other things. In November 1854, he bought a publication called The Field newspaper. So this had been set up about 1853, that should say, not 1953. But the person who set it up, I think it was 2 people together, they didn't do terribly well with it. So he saw it as an opportunity and he bought it for, I think, about £1,600. And within, I think it's 5 years, it was producing £20,000 a year for its proprietor. So he made an awful lot of money through this. And this is what it looked like, the first issue that came out. So you can see the field there. You've got foxes, you've got hounds, you've got rabbits, you've got people on horseback, you've got guns, fishing rods, men fishing, trees, all sorts of different things there. So it must have been quite something to actually read it. And the field actually continued for an awfully long time. It also celebrated its centenary. I'll show you that in a moment. And it led to things like the Field Bedside Book, which I actually have. That's an original copy of it. So basically, people took one of the columns that was in there and actually made it into a book. And that happened with various other things within it. And these are some articles that actually appeared in there. And I just picked out a few different things here. So the first one was how to keep horses economically. And I thought that's still relevant today. So people want to know how to feed horses and hints about them. And hints about feeding horses and other cattle solely on gorse, winds, or furze and how to cultivate it. An essay on the composition and fertilizing qualities of Peruvian guano. So that's basically the stuff that birds poop. And pointing out the best mode of its application to the soil. Price 1 shilling. And another one here, we have Foster's Pocket Peerage and Baronetage of Great Britain. Men of the Time, an alphabetical biography of living authors. The Comic Almanac and the Art of Skating. So it was very varied, the different things that were actually put in there, but it was all thought that these sort of things would appeal to its audience, who were men who enjoyed hunting and fishing or came from a fairly wealthy background. Country gentlemen was how they were described. And I actually have the copy of this document here, this journal, The Field. So this is the centenary edition. And I inherited some bits and pieces, or rather my father did, from my great uncle Charles, who will be a subject for next year. And he had the centenary copy of The Field in there. And so I flicked through it in preparation for doing this. So this came out in 1952 and picked out some of the different adverts and things that I thought were quite fun. So in the 1890s, cats, 6p each, looks like a real live cat and stands 13 inches high when stuffed, even dogs deceived. And the little bit below that, independence through the bicycle, the real women of today and tomorrow are sharp, wide awake, aggressive and self-assertive. They know no fear, and what sense of shame they have wears a different aspect from that of their ancestors. They stand no nonsense and need no help, save in the matters appertaining to their machines. Then we move on a little bit, and we have an insatiable carnivore. Oh, how voraciously you roar. Is it because, like us, you feel you need a Guinness with your meal? Now, Guinness has been around an awfully long time. And this was an advert from, I think, about the 1950s. This was one from the centenary issue there. And you can see that the man holding his Guinness is actually running away from the lion quite successfully in the background there. And I also managed to find out the actual first edition of the Field. I don't have a copy of this, but this is actually from the British Newspaper Archive. Sorry, no, this is an extract from the first edition, which is from what I've actually got at home. And I found some other things on the British Newspaper Archive. But this was really useful because I have been looking for a long time to try and find out where the Field offices were. And I've got a copy of a picture like the one in the bottom left-hand side there, which shows the Queen and the Field and things the outside of the building as a curved building. And I believe that that's on the end of Fleet Street, down near the tube station, but I've never actually found that building, and I'm not sure it still exists. And then another one is the Field House off Chancery Lane in the City of London, where it was edited from 1891 to 1939. And again, I don't think that building still exists. So actually seeing photographs of them in situ hopefully means that I can go up to London and see if I can actually find them next time. I have an idea about where they were, and one of the places was called Bream's Building, and I'm not sure if that's the same place as the one in the middle there. But this is a lovely article. So it talks about yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and a reply to the greetings of our well-wishers and a statement of our intentions for the future. That's the first part of it. And then the second part of it is talking about the previous century. And basically, it talks about the history of it. And I just wanted to pick out one or two bits and pieces here. So Sergeant Cox was my ancestor. Edward William Cox was a sergeant at arms, which basically was a precursor to the KCs and QCs in the legal profession today. So they senior barristers is basically a good way of describing it. So he stated explicitly that he intended to inform and amuse those who take an interest in rural sports, amusements, or occupations, from the country gentleman, the lord of acres, to the man of business who goes home after his day's work in town to enjoy his garden and his paddock. And then it talks about different people who work for it there. And then it carries on here, and it talks about John Crockford, owner of the Clerical Directory bearing his name, which was also incorporated in the business of Sergeant Cox, was entrusted with the management of the firm, and another important property was added to it when he bought the Queen in 1862. And then it even mentions more people here. So Horace Cox was assisted by his son. So Horace is another of my great-grandfathers. He was, and I will explain it in a minute, he was Sergeant Cox's nephew. And then it goes down to Percy Cox, who's my great-grandfather. So he was on the editorial side of the Queen. So I've got more details in here about the precise newspapers and magazines that different people looked after, which I didn't have before I actually read this. So this was really useful reading this. And finally, the Cox family decided to sell their property. The purchasers were the Right Honourable Walter Runciman, afterwards Lord Runciman, and his father, Sir Walter, who became Lord Runciman. And they took over in 1919 there. He sold it. And then the Queen Centenary Edition. Again, this is another one collected by my Uncle Charles in 1961, this particular one. 2 and 6. One of the adverts within, a lady in a very smart wedding dress of parchment Duchess satin with matching Nottingham lace, train cut in one with the dress, price 89 guineas. I just thought that's a beautiful picture. Available only from Alexandrine Limited, 60 Grosvenor Street, London, W1, till Mayfair 0763, and also in Nottingham. So Nottingham is where the lace came from. And then we're a little bit more up to date here. We are again in the 60s. Travel happy with California and Crimpoline. Fly to California in style by BOAC Rolls-Royce 707 jetliner. However far you travel, when you wear your California dress made in uncrushable Crimpoline, you'll arrive as immaculate as you were at takeoff. Later, tub your dress by hand or machine, tumble or spin dry it. And it's lovely to see different things that people the different styles and fashions of the time. So when we look at it, the centenary edition cover is going back to what the fashions were in the 1860s, and then we've got the fashions here in the 1960s. And I just thought this was a lovely photograph here. This is a lady talking about bingo. Great expression there. And then towards the end of the magazine, it included different advertisements in there. And this is the block makers, so the people who created the blocks that they actually use for doing the printing. So they've done the reverse of that, and they've got the different things on there showing the process of actually getting the magazine created. So Edward William Cox's will, he was actually very specific in his will when he died about what he wanted to happen with all his newspapers and things. So my newspaper property, copyrights, including the Field, the Law Times, Queen, Exchange and Mark, Country, County Courts Chronicle, Royal Exchange, and all others belonging to me at the time of my decease, and anything else that is purchased or acquired by my trustees. And he mentioned his orchids. He was very keen on his orchids. And this is actually a picture of him at home in his conservatory with his orchids. And his orchids are literally mentioned in his will because they were quite expensive at the time. And again, in his will, he talks about two of his nephews. So Horace Aubrey Cox and Leonard Upcott Gill are managers of some newspapers and publications, and there were specific legal agreements in 1878 and 79, and they must have been done. I don't know whether he knew he was dying, because he actually died really suddenly. Apparently, he died at home. He was talking, and he was a local magistrate, and he had his dinner, and he sat down in his chair and he died pretty much. So whether he had an inkling that something had been wrong, or maybe hadn't been feeling particularly well over the last year, but he did this legal agreements with his nephews. And it actually states these. And this will is beautifully laid out because it has these notes in the margins telling you what the different parts of the will are actually about, which is very useful when it comes to actually looking through it briefly. So Horace is continuing as manager of whichever newspapers he's got, and as is Leonard Upcott Gill. So then, to just explain a little bit more about who those two people were, we need to go back a generation. So Edward was the eldest son of William Charles Cox and Harriet Upcott. So Harriet was born in 1773, and that is a photograph of her as a very old lady, which I do actually have, and that is in my photographic collection there. So he was the eldest son, and his brother William, who is the next one down, is also my great-grandfather. He is Horace's father. And then a little bit further along, you'll see another name which looks quite familiar. I am not the first Emma Cox in the tree. I've only found another, so there's just the two of us, but Emma is significant. She married Charles Gill. So the other people shown on there weren't involved in the business. Looking at Edward and his descendants, so Edward married twice. He married Sophia Ann Harris, and they had Erwin. So Erwin did actually take over the business, and he ran it for quite a considerable time. And then of his second marriage with Rosalinda, who you might remember from previous talks that I've done, they had living children who survived. They only had Ada and Harding, or they had about 4 others, but unfortunately they died very young. And so Ada married Henry Bennett Edwards, and Harding married Hebe Barlow. So Ada's son, Jos, wasn't actually born at the time of Edward William Cox's will. So he's mentioned on here because he did something within the business, and I have not yet found when he died or his own will. So that's one of the things that I'm still looking for. But Percy was the other one who was mentioned, so he was one of the editors. So you can see it went down through the different generations there. So we've got William with Horace, and then Emma's sons are Leonard and Crandon Dawes Gill. And they were both involved with the business as well. Just thought I'd highlight these different people on there so you can see the different people that were actually involved with the business, whichever parts of the business, the different parts of the business. So going on to Horace, so he's my 2 times great-grandfather. he had various different things, and he was most well known for actually being a book publisher. And I actually have a Google search for, actually no, I have an eBay search for Horace Cox, and every now and then I get little things saying that this book is available on eBay, and I've bought a few just so that I've actually got them. So they're generally hunting and fishing books. There's one about the history of the fox terrier, which actually mentions various other people within the family because they were involved in breeding them. So it's quite fun actually getting all of that information. So of his sons, Percy was editor of the Queen, Bevan was editor of the Field, and Horace Percy was involved in general management. So you can see it continued for another generation there. And this is an example of the Law Times and what it actually contained in 1898. This is an advertisement actually in the Field saying if you want to get the Law Times, you will get copies, topics of the week, powers of attorney and bankruptcy, drafting of legal documents, notes from Ireland, recent decisions, law reports, quarter session dates, and so it goes on. And it's published by Horace Cox of Bream's Building. So that's one of the places that I've been looking for in 1898. And continuing on, Horace published something called Crockford's Clerical Directory. So you may remember that in the centenary edition. And basically, this is a listing of the clergy. So this is saying who was the vicar of so-and-so, or who was the bishop or archbishop, and that sort of thing. And it tells you, for example, here we've got the Reverend Vaughan Thomas, late Fellow of Oxford, died aged 84. And at the time of his death, held the following preferments: Vicarage of Stoneleigh in Warwickshire, and his patron was Lord Lee. And he was promoted in 1804, Vicarage of Yarnton in Oxfordshire, patron Sir George Dashwood. He's quite famous, actually. Promoted 1803, Rectory of Dunkbourne Rouse, Gloucestershire. And so it goes on. So this is an idea of the type of things that you could find out. So there's quite a lot of information in it about an individual cleric and where they practiced, whatever the practicing was. And this is an example of what it actually looks like. So a picture of the fourth issue. And basically when it started, there was some issue, and I was reading about this. It was saying about, it was published in the order that they got the information, I believe. And then after a couple of issues, it became very complicated, and they decided to actually alphabetize it so that people could find what they were looking for a lot more easily. Moving on to something called the Exchange and Mart. So this, I remember the Exchange and Mart when I was young. It used to be a bit bigger than A4, had a red top to it, and it was full of advertisements, absolutely full of advertisements. So when it started off, it actually was part of the Queen, the ladies' newspaper, and it was a section within that where people were selling things. So the type of things that they could be selling: animals and birds, autographs, coins, curiosities, furniture, sporting implements, all sorts of different things. So people can exchange, and they can sell things, or they can put things that they want there. So this is the advertisement for the first issue of the Exchange and Mart, and it was the first to specialize in classified advertising. And I just put this on here because I thought this is lovely in terms of the sort of things that were actually on here and the prices that were there. So you could get an accordion for 16 shillings, an African grass hammock for £4, an emu skin offers, Grimm's correspondence offers, a church service for 4 shillings again. And so it goes on, a barometer, Indian Empire, all sorts of different things there, travelling desk, coffee warmers, Limerick lace scarf. So it was quite eclectic, is probably the best way of actually describing that. And you had to go to the offices to actually view what was for sale. And it does still exist, but it's now online only in car sales. So literally, if you want to buy a car, it's a good place to look in this country. And then I started looking into the Gill family. If you can remember, these are the sons of Emma Cox, the first Emma Cox, who married Charles Gill. And I found this newspaper called Scoop, which I hadn't come across before. and basically has little mini biographies talking about the different publications that people work for and a little bit of biographical information in that. And this has helped filling in quite a few of the gaps because I wasn't that familiar with the Gill family, some of them. So we've got Leonard Upcott Gill. Remember, he was working, he was one of the ones who was the nephew who took over the management. And it talks about his sons and daughters, who he worked for, that sort of thing. Last known address. And then we've got Dora Gill, who was a journalist, and she was his daughter. We've got Rosa Crandon Gill, and she was his sister, if I remember rightly. And Crandon Dawes Gill, again, he was on the Exchange and Mart staff and became manager and editor. So you can see people's progression here. And this database is available. And I paid £5 for 1 day's access because I just thought I'll have a look and see what's on there and see what's worth it. And it was great to actually just get all this information. And I managed to find information on Percy Cox and a couple of other people on there. So very worthwhile £5 there. So talking a little bit more about Leonard Upcott Gill, and he basically published books that were on natural themes, the countryside and that sort of thing. And I did a search for him, and again, quite eclectic, The Book of the Caravan, Angling in Salt Water and Practical Sea Fishing. So those were published in 1905, 1910, roughly. And you see, then they still go for a reasonable sum of money. They're not subjects that are particularly of interest to me. But if I came across something that was, then I probably would buy it just to keep one as a memento, as it were. And that's a site called Stella and Rose's Books, specialists in rare and collectible books. He also published something on the seaside watering places on the Isle of Man. I'll just open that one up and you can see it. And this talks about how it was all set out, a description of different places you can go to, how to travel around within it, the major places within the Isle of Man, with a little map here as well. And I thought this one was rather fun. Speaking Parrots, Coloured Plates. Beautiful book. And I would like to have this one, but unfortunately, I'm not going to pay $350 for it. That's a little bit too much. And I found a newspaper article via the British Newspaper Archive saying where somebody was defaming him. And it said that publisher of the Bazaar and Exchange and Mart, Mr. Lewis Edmonds, appeared to prosecute. Mr. Barton Brown defended. Mr. Edmonds said during the last 7 months, the prosecutor had been persistently annoyed by the receipt of libelous postcards from the defendant. He'd not contented himself with sending to his office, had addressed a letter to the editor and proprietor of the Stopkeeper, as follows: gentlemen, please will you kindly insert this advertisement in your columns 3 or 4 times and greatly oblige yours truly, N. Joyce. P.S. I am a taker in your newspaper and also an advertiser. The advertisement read as follows: money stopped sick by the Bazaar people. Please write N. Joyce, Tulse Hill. We have only got 2 summons against such dishonest people. We should like to got 40 or 50. And so basically, he's libeling them. And he basically was asked to apologize and paid 5 guineas and about a bond of £100 to be on good behaviour for a year. And I just thought that's quite an interesting story. The proprietors cracked up Bazaar, catch them alive, and pickpocketing newspaper. People got away with all sorts of things there. I mean, it's a bit like what people say on social media today, but they actually took out advertisements and put their names on the bottom of it. What helped me in my own research? So Wikipedia is always good, but do actually make sure that the sources that you check on there are correct. Family wills. So I had Edward William Cox's that I got from the London Archives, that's now called, it should say there. The Dictionary of National Biography for his biography there. British Newspaper Archive. JSTOR is another site that a lot of people don't necessarily go to, and they had articles on him on there. A Books, that's where the Speaking Parrots came from. So always a good idea to look at all the secondhand booksellers, and you can actually set up alerts on there, and they'll email you if they've got different, they get any results for those searches. Stella and Rose's Books again. scoop, as I mentioned. So that's it for today. Any questions?
Fantastic. You know, I thank you so much, Emma. That was a fun romp. You found me as you were talking about buildings. I can't help myself in London. I went immediately to Google Street Maps. I've been back to London in a very long time. I lived there for 6 months as in high school and have this image. And of course, you see the Google Street View and you say, "Wait, oh yeah, they're modern cars."
And also, a lot of
But
the buildings have gone because there's been so
oh, I
much
know.
construction, and even the
Yeah.
streets have gone. So, trying to find some of the old street names. There's some quite good guides actually for old London street names if you want to find them.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's it. I remember a post that you did way back when, showing using the maps and finding a particular triangle area.
Yes.
And you sent me to the Scotland, the
The National
fabulous
Library of Scotland.
National
Yes.
Library of Scotland with their fabulous map collection. Um, so I was just I got lost. I had a good time. Now where is oh, there's the tube. But it's a great way to look at it. I'm astonished at how many modern buildings are simply designed to look old. I'm like, that's not old. One of the questions that I had was William Edward Cox, having started out with his books relating to the kinds of things that attorneys need to have published. I thought that was rather charming. Was he actually an attorney himself to know what those needs would be?
Oh, yes. He was a trained solicitor, and he had he was in Lincoln's Inn, which is one of the inns of London. And he was never particularly successful as a solicitor. He was a sergeant at arms. He actually got the stained glass from the old sergeant's inn in London, and he installed that at his house north of London. So I've got details of that as well. So yeah, he was definitely involved in the legal profession. He was aware of what it did. In terms of family, his father-in-law was the commissioner of bankruptcy. So his father-in-law was John Samuel Martin Fonblanc, and there was a good legal profession down that side. So he was heavily involved in the legal profession as well as doing publishing.
Right. But he was, sounds like in his heart, he was an entrepreneur and
Yes.
always seeing what those angles were and what was happening. And, you know, it doesn't hurt to be a solicitor while you're doing all of that because you know how your contracts are going to be written and whatever
Yeah.
else. But it, you know, in those days where publishing, the costs of publishing had suddenly changed so much, you know, it's like Silicon Valley. Those are the high
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
That's really
And if you
amazing.
look at
Fleet Street.
his Wikipedia entry, you can see he wrote various books himself. He was interested in psychology, I think it was, and he set up. I'm probably going to get this wrong. The British Psychology Society or something like that. It was psychology, it wasn't psychiatry. But he had interest in that. He had interest in spirituality, all sorts of different things. So he wrote quite a lot himself.
It's a great example of the moment in time when a technologies suddenly makes some the economics of a business change
Mm.
and you're inventing it. You know, we today even imagine that guy in 2000 and the websites he would have been creating. He would
Elon
have been
Musk of his
creating a
day,
Google.
probably. Yeah, he
Yeah,
because he
yeah.
left the equivalent of millions. He
Oh
owned
yeah.
something like the 10 or 20,000 acres of what's now North London, and big houses, and he was Lord of the Manor of Taunton Dean and all sorts of things. So and he had all the different publishing businesses,
Minting money.
and I think it all stemmed from things like the Law Times, where he was getting 20,000 a year from it. That's a
Right,
lot of money.
because that was needed. You know, it was a function that was needed,
Mm,
and there was no other way to produce it. And when you have the publishing components, sure, I'll make a few more. It doesn't matter.
mm.
You just keep paying me. And pretty soon the advertisers are hooked. And what a genius business. Um, uh, you know, it has me really thinking about I have a great grandfather who was in the right place at the right time in the Midwest of the United States in the 1950s. Well, actually, he from the 1880s when he was in his 20s through the 1950s when he passed, and just that tremendous change in that period of time. And he was a writer. He stepped up to be a journalist and then eventually a publisher of a small newspaper. He's published all over the place. And he's always to me been intimidating as someone to sit down and chase around. But you've just given us such wonderful little handles for ways to go about it. And I was about to ask the question, how can I find the compendium of all publications somebody ever did? And I answered my own question by here in the United States, just go to the Library of Congress for starters. I mean, I've got the magazines and newspapers and they have a separate section, but doing that. And then I bumped into a county by county who are the important people in each county. And I'm in 600-page document of the important people of Salina County, Kansas. It's fascinating.
Very
Down the rabbit
addictive when
hole
you
we
find these
go.
old documents, isn't it? Then you start looking and you
Right.
start thinking, oh, what could I do with that? And is that relevant? And yes.
So how do you stay in control? How do you keep following one white rabbit and not 47 and forget what it was about the pocket watch?
I think it's just trying to sort of give myself a target of not overwhelming people with the amount of information I'm going to share, and to try and keep it on a theme and think, well, if that might go into its own theme. So just keeping it so that there's one area and thinking that would make another topic for a future one. So,
So it
for
sounds like
example,
the answer to the question of how to keep yourself on the straight and narrow is to think about your audience. I think
yes.
that's actually kind of brilliant. That's kind
Mm,
of brilliant because
mm,
left on our own with, oh, you just gave me a nifty new hammer to go find things. Everything looks like a nail, but stop. Who is your audience? What are you going to do with this? And then go chase
yes.
that. Very good.
And when
Very good.
I'm planning one of these, I do sit down and I think about the heading for the topic and I brainstorm and write down all the different things that I could probably put in there and think, well, where do I get that information from? What kind of information is it? What will I do with that information? And which bits do I want to pull out of that? And then it might be that the majority of it goes into the one I'm doing now, or it might be some of it goes into something in the future. But I try and do that. And then I sort of think about trying to do it, splitting things into threes and then going from there.
The magic of three. What do you mean by this split it into three?
So it could be where you what you're looking for. So starting with where are you finding the information? What sources are you looking for? What information have you got? What are you actually going to be doing with it? So I try and sort of think about: am I going to talk about three people? Am I going to take three different elements of something? Am I going to focus, for example, I could have done this in lots of different ways. I could have just said, right, I'm just going to look at purely Edward William Cox and the newspapers that he published, the periodicals that published. But then it actually makes it more interesting if I then take it to include other people within it and how that developed. And so the different things that he created or other people created, and the way that it, so it's a pattern, looking for patterns and things and inheritance and thinking, well, it started as this, and as it went down the generations it morphed slightly into something slightly different, and then it changed a bit more, and then that was the end of that line, or it carried on, or whatever you actually did with it.
So in this case, for example, it went from being a solicitor into a publishing industry, a publishing empire.
Yeah.
And it sounds, I can sort of see scenes of succession in terms of I don't know if you have that show there, a whole family empire and how that passes down and where that creates. Other questions from the rest of you? Other thoughts?
You're on mute,
Go ahead,
Jennifer.
Jennifer.
Sorry, I always do that.
There you go.
Um, I just love that, Emma, because I'm just one of those people that can get very distracted very easily and skid down a rabbit hole. And I love the old newspapers. I really do. Some of the things you can find in them, you know.
Yeah.
And that banner of the field, it was just beautiful, wasn't it? You know, I mean, it
Yeah.
was so busy
Oh,
compared to today, but it
Yeah.
really was, yeah, yeah.
But
And I
it
love
like it
the
did what it said on the tin, didn't it? It described
yeah,
what the magazine or the newspaper is
yeah.
going to be about. Mm.
You would have known as soon as you picked it up, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and as a bike rider, I love that you mentioned the bit about females riding because I love those articles. You know, some of the comments that are made about how dare women wear pants on bikes and, you know, how dare they even ride a bike for a start because it's not womanly. Yeah, so I love that. Yeah, yeah, so it was great. And I really enjoyed at the end, Emma, hearing your process, you know, your processes you use. It's
Mm.
interesting, you know.
Mm. Everyone
I
does
find
things differently. Mm.
if I'm writing a post, I just have to say because it can take me 3 weeks to write a 2 minute post just because I get distracted, you know, too easily, and I end up researching someone who's nothing to do with where I started. So I just have to say that's what I'm doing. I'm going to write this post and close all my tabs. Usually have 100 tabs open. They're closed while I wrote the post, and no going sideways because it just can take me forever. But I mean, it's
Yeah.
all interesting, and that's the fun of it, isn't it? You know,
It is
the
the fun of it,
interesting
and it's
stories behind
sometimes
the
nice
story.
to actually write things down and thinking, oh, that I don't want that now, but it will be useful in the
Yeah,
future, that you
yeah,
don't forget
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Mm.
it's good. It was great, Emma. I loved it. Yeah.
Thank you.
fabulous.
Yeah,
Bill,
no,
I saw you jump off mute. Go ahead.
yeah. Well, like I said, it's really interesting to see how, uh, so many of your family members, uh, got involved in publishing, and in a way, it's really gone all the way down to you. You're not
Mm.
Yeah.
publishing a newspaper, but you are doing your podcasts, and um, it's apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Mm.
Mm.
And very appropriate given my name as
Exactly.
well.
I
Yeah.
But Barbara, one of the things you said earlier on, it's like you said that you found a distance from your great grandfather who was a publisher. You found that slightly intimidating, whereas I find him attractive, my one, and it's like I want to know more about him. I feel there's a connection of some sort. It's like he's one of the people that I'm fortunate that there's quite a lot of information available about him, so I can find different things. And I have lost something that I found a while ago, which was a description of somebody going to visit him in his office and talking about walking through the publication printing rooms and different things like that, and going to his office and interviewing him and doing whatever. And I would love to find that again because I know I saw it. I don't know what I've done with it, but just sort of. And he was very kind to this young man, and he explained what was going on and everything. And just there's a little things like that. And I always think that he must have been he was an honest man. He was a hardworking man. He cared about his family. He cared about society and all sorts of things. And I just think he's a nice person to want to know more about. Put it,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, I say that in part because I feel as though there are so many skills that I have still to learn. And I'm running alongside all of you who are so experienced and talented. And that for me, this great grandfather feels like an advanced course I'm not ready for yet. And in part
Learning.
because there are so many things that have been written about him. And if I go marching off and publish something, somebody else is going to say, but yeah, but you totally missed this whole obvious whole category. I'm like,
but the thing about it is like I did something a while ago which was excuse me, finding a person in your tree and writing 1,000-word article about them. And I did one about him a few years ago, and that was a blog post that sat on my website for years and years. And then I had that picture of the painting on there of him with his orchids, and someone contacted me to say, I used to live in that house and we've got that painting. And she's not a relative,
Oh,
but she actually bought that painting. And it's like, okay. And so there's all sorts of things, but it doesn't have to be intimidating. You can write an article about someone, keep it relatively short, choose the number of words you want to use. So it was 1,000-word sort of challenge type thing at the time, and I think I did 2 or 3 of them. But it was just a good way of trying to do some sort of biographical summary of somebody, picking out the parts that I found interesting and I thought other people might like to find interesting, and starting from there. It doesn't need to be something massive. You're not writing the biography of somebody. You're just finding a few interesting facts to share with people.
I think that's brilliant. I think that really comes to, at the end of the day, what we are doing here. It's almost conceited to think that you are going to write the be all end all classic ultimate compilation of this entire person's life. That's utter nonsense. But to take a specific challenge and write that down and then discover from that you learn more because that's what you're interested in, takes advantage of where we are today. We can write a post, it's going to be visible on the net, and others can find it and write back. I had that experience myself from the My 16s series and discovered all of these cousins across 2 lines that have been completely lost to me because I was completely wrong in my post. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Just opens opportunities, doesn't it?
Yeah,
that's right.
Just on that,
Brilliant.
Barbara.
Yeah.
So when I put my posts out there, I don't think they're just my little post with my dates, and I don't really think they're going out in the world to anything important. But maybe there's that one person who will come along and say, "Oh, that's my ancestor, and I can use this as a basis to build on it." Yeah.
It dawns on me, it's a little bit like I was flipping through a high school yearbook the other day and seeing these pictures of old friends and comments that people added. At the time, they were a big deal, but in retrospect, of course, it's a little trivial nothing. And yet, coming back and looking at it becomes its nugget in time, its little moment that says something about everything around it, and that itself is compelling. Yeah.
And that's where finding all the old newspapers with the advertisements, the magazines and things like that. What was important to people at the time? Guano. It's like, at the time it was really significant. It was a fertilizer, it was whatever. But nowadays, no. We have artificial stuff.
Peruvian guano. That's what had me. Yeah. What are they doing? Scraping it around out of the Andes mountains and shipping it to London for a shilling? It just doesn't make sense to me.
But that's where it's fun, reading all of these old things, isn't it? Just to see what people did and the things that have gone through fashion or have gone through being required and have been superseded by something else.
I actually did go look up, what was it? Fuzz, something like
that. Fuzz.
Yes.
Yeah. Gorse. So I don't know if you're familiar with gorse.
And furs. No,
yes,
apparently
gorse has got
sometimes.
Gorse is actually quite relevant because I grew up on the Ashdown Forest, and it used to get burnt years ago, which is a really good thing, and they don't do it enough nowadays. And so the gorse has got massive, and if you cut it, it basically just spreads the seed absolutely everywhere, and you get more of it, and it's prickly and horrible, and it's a fire hazard and all sorts of things. And so they should actually grub it out and get rid of it.
Yeah, so, it's the controlled burns, as we call them here in California. This is a big deal. And just so everybody knows, this is what we all call the 100-acre wood, all of us Winnie the Pooh fans, right next door to Emma Cox. Well, I think this brings us to a conclusion of another wonderful episode of Emma Explores. Always a fun romp down a shared Anglophone history to a world that seems so far away, and a piece of history. And here we have a tour guide, a very personal tour guide who can give us that insight and also inspire us to our own stories and where we take it. So as always, thank you so much, Emma. We look forward to what's coming in future episodes. And I know you give a little thought to these patterns from one episode to the next. Any tips of what's coming?
Well, the next one, I'm actually going to be talking about signatures. So the physical signatures that people put onto different documents for different reasons. So where you can find them, what kind of things you might come across, and potentially a few things that you could actually do with them. And I just thought it's sort of a slightly crafty element to it in some ways, but quite fun for Christmas as well.
Yeah.
At one point we had, okay, I just thought of the Christmas tree ornaments for all of your ancestors' signatures. Wouldn't that be fun? But I
That could be good.
digress.
Yeah.
You Shutterfly for 20 seconds and 39 cents. You can produce, photo little ornaments. I'm sorry. But I was thinking about the database that's, QR code on the backside, QR code that, and it takes you to a Substack post that is all about that ancestor. I'm sorry. Get so excited.
Yeah.
You could do all sorts of different things, couldn't you?
Yeah. But a database, I think the important thing to me here is you could do all sorts of different things, yes. But the thoughtfulness of your modern genealogist should be to pay attention when you're collecting this kind of nugget, that it can be used and reused in context. So to keep it hooked to where it is and where the rest of it is. So have you thought a lot about databases that would give you a way to take an image of this signature, the highest resolution image that you've found, for example, of a signature, and cross-reference it to the person by, the profile in a shared family tree or something like that? Have you thought about that?
No.
Google, Google Sheets actually does pictures rather nicely now. They didn't for the longest time, and it's a little janky. Maybe I'll do you a little video, a little, GIF or something to show you how simple that is to do.
This is something to talk about during the next episode, and different things that you can do with it, how you can collect them, what you can do them. So yeah.
I get off. I do get excited. Thank you so much again, and we'll look forward to next month's episode. And until then, I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Emma.